Let's go ahead and bring in Steiner Sports CEO, Brandon Steiner.
One of the country's top memorabilia mogul.
I have an unbelievable guest, Brandon Steiner.
Brandon's second to none.
We have Mike Imperioli here, who's just a phenomenal writer, actor. You know him from The Sopranos. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about his new book, The Perfumed Burned His Eyes. Now, I'm curious about this book just because, you know, Mike grew up maybe 3 miles from here. So we're going to talk a little bit about that story and how much truth there is to it. Hello. Good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, my friend. Thanks for having me.
So much to talk about because you're in a bunch of my favorite movies as well. But first, who's this book for? Why'd you write it?
This book is a coming-of-age story, right? Set in New York City in 1976, about a 16-year-old boy. And I started writing it as a way to relate to my 16-year-old son, my son who was 16 at the time, who was going through what 16-year-olds go through.
Impossibility.
Yeah, well, you know.
You're the idiot.
Yeah, and just trying to relate to that frame of mind. So I started writing this character. This is around 2013. It is 2013. And then a few months into the writing of this, Lou Reed passed away. And Lou Reed was a big hero of mine as an artist and musician. And
New York guy.
Yeah, and I got to know him and become friends with him in like the last decade or so of his life. So his death hit me on a couple of different levels, and then I came up with the idea of what if I kind of bring these two characters together somehow, because it's a very New York story, and what better symbol of New York culturally than Lou Reed. So the kid loses his two main male role models in a short period of time when he's 16, his grandfather and his father, and he moves from Jackson Heights, blue-collar neighborhood. The mother inherits some money from her father, which she didn't know he had, and they moved to the Upper East Side of Manhattan. New life for this kid. Now he's in a private school. He's in this ritzy neighborhood, and living upstairs is Lou Reed with his transgendered girlfriend, doing speed and writing music and being crazy, and which is where Lou was at the time. And this Lou becomes kind of a quasi father figure, mentor-ish, and the kid's kind of running errands for him and stuff, and we start to see, how this kid approaches manhood, in 1976.
Lou Reed was also like a little bit of a sleeper on a national scope, but if you were in Manhattan, he was such a Manhattan. He'd jump into bars and play, and he there was no boundaries.
He was.
It seemed like with him.
He was a real, he was a New York guy, and he wasn't hugely famous. Towards the end of his life, he became, as people grew older, who grew up with him, became kind of a bigger star. But he was relatively an underground guy. I mean, he had the hit, Walk on the Wild Side, which everybody knew. But he still kind of remained almost an indie, underground kind of presence in a lot of ways.
Growing up in Mount Vernon, what was that like? I mean, that's not an
Great.
easy place to grow up, or it was great?
Great place to grow up.
You played any hoops? Or
No, I'm terrible at hoops.
Okay.
Awful.
But that's always Mount Vernon.
Mount Vernon is known for hoops. But I was born in 66, so I grew up there in the 70s and early 80s a little bit. I got to Manhattan around 83, but Mount Vernon it's an interesting place because it's not the city per se. Right, it's right outside the city limits, but it's not really the suburbs. It kind of hits this sweet spot. So in some ways you're kind of sheltered, but in some ways you're not. You can take the 2 train from downtown Manhattan and get off at the last stop in the Bronx and walk to Mount Vernon. So you have that access, but you're not in the thick of things.
Not a wealthy neighborhood, though.
No, but where I grew up, it was mostly Italian, very tight-knit. Families that knew each other for generations. You walk outside, all your friends are there. We played football and baseball and hockey in the street,
Old school.
Mr. Softy would come at 11 o'clock at night in the summer, and we'd hang out on the stoops, and people's parents would be out. I'm kind of idyllic in a weird way. Ringalivio when we were little, stuff like that.
It's kind of like the boroughs, really. It was the boroughs, but up in Westchester.
Yeah,
right?
It was a wonderful time and place to grow up, I would say, too.
When did the acting and what is it, writing, acting, producing? Which is your favorite out of the three? And when did it start? When did you realize that was that direction you were going to go?
Towards the end of high school, I started thinking about, well, what am I going to do in my life? And I wasn't sure. I mean, I was a decent student, and I was thinking of going into pre-med because back then that's what everyone said. You got to be a doctor to make money or some crazy shit. Yeah. And then I had a really good English teacher who turned me on to really good books and took me to see theater. And my parents always took me to see theater. And my dad was a bus driver in the Bronx, like the Bronx Tale, you know. And he started doing community theater when I was 14. So there was that element. And I started in my junior year, I started reading a lot of plays in the school library. So then finally I said, well, if I could do anything in the world, what would it be? And I said, it'd probably be acting. But how do you become an actor? I mean, I didn't know anybody.
How do you get started?
I was going to go to college up in Albany, SUNY Albany, and I backed out at the last minute, like in September with my bags packed. The night before we were going to drive up, I had gone up for the weekend for orientation in the summer.
Why?
And I just said,
well, what spooked you?
I wanted to be in the city.
You just
and I wanted to go to acting
it.
school. Yeah, I felt like I knew what I wanted to do, so I went to Lee Strasberg acting school in Manhattan, in Union Square.
Your parents all good with that reversal?
They were a little surprised,
okay.
But they were like, "Listen, it's your life. You gotta really follow your heart." But they said, "Then you should go to college, you know." So, but I never wound up going. I just started going to acting school and I studied for a while. I would try to get work. You know, back then they had the trade newspapers where there would be auditions for like plays and indie movies.
How many auditions do you think you went on before anything even happened?
Tons.
Like hundreds?
It could be, you know, because you'd go on these auditions for plays that didn't pay any money off Broadway, and you'd get there like 10 in the morning. There might be 300 people online. And you'd wait all day, and you'd go and do a monologue, and they probably already knew who they were going to cast because they had, if you were doing a play, the rule with the union was you have to have open auditions in addition to hiring equity people. So you had to have open auditions for non-union people, which a lot of times they were just lip service because they were required to. So they weren't going to hire you anyway. I did that for about 4 years until...
How'd you make money?
In restaurant business.
Waiting tables?
Waiting tables. Forlini's, you know Forlini's down in Chinatown.
Wow.
A lot of restaurants. Waiting tables, cook, bartender, busboy, all that stuff.
You were grinding.
Moving furniture, messenger, hung lights in a off-Broadway theater, did all that stuff.
What was the break?
Well, I got a play, which that wasn't really a break. I got a play that was an off-Broadway play they put in, got a lot of publicity because it was based on a true story about Hell's Kitchen and the Westies, that kind of thing. And I got fired 3 days after we opened. I was the lead in the play. 3 days after we opened, I got fired because I kind of deserved to get fired because I didn't respect the director, and I didn't listen to him, and he didn't like that, and he fired me.
So that was your clarity that you maybe had a little bit of an authority issue.
I didn't really know how to work. I mean, I knew how to act in acting class, which is very different because you're just focused on what you're doing.
Or
you're
somebody
not
just really telling you what to do, and it wasn't democratic.
Yes. So
It wasn't
that
asking
was a
for your
big
vote.
lesson.
Yeah.
But then I got a girl in my class had an audition for an agent, and the agent wound up signing both of us. So now this is like 5 years into doing this. And then I got a part in a movie called Lean on Me with Morgan Freeman, directed by John Alvinson, who did Rocky.
That was a good movie.
So I had one line, which got cut. The line was, "Hey, I'm going to be a star." That's the line, right? But I had never been in front of a camera. So if you've never been in front of a camera, this is a movie camera, not a video. This big old Panavision, whatever.
They shot it about 50 times.
Well, being in front of a camera all of a sudden is scared the crap out of me. I had never done that.
Yeah.
And here's John Alvinson, who won the Oscar for Rocky. He's directing. There's all these kids. We're in a gym. And they're calling all the bad kids up to the stage, and Morgan Freeman's going to throw us out of school. And I had this line, and I figured, well, I was so nervous, like literally shaking nervous, like I wanted to throw up nervous. So I said, well, if I mumble, maybe they won't notice me, or so, literally. They're calling the names, and everyone says something. They call my name, and I'm like, hey, I'm gonna be a star. And they cut after everybody does their lines, and he comes over and he's giving direction to all the actors. He goes, and you with that line, if you don't give me something, you're out of here. I'm just like, so I wound up doing it again. The line didn't make it, but you do see me in the movie. I have long hair. I'm 22, and then no line, but you see me up there with Morgan Freeman, behind Morgan Freeman. Then I did 2 other indie movies, and then I auditioned for Goodfellas, and I got Goodfellas. So after Goodfellas,
Let's not skip quite over Goodfellas
that
so
put
quick.
me on the map. So then,
So many people's favorite movie.
well, that movie, when it came out, everybody in the industry saw it, so it became easier to get work, because it's like, oh, you were the guy, and at that point you can say I did this, because people in our business, they want to hire you based on experience. They don't want to hire
resume
someone.
business.
Yeah, they want to know you know how to handle yourself and have experience, and for good reason, because my first experience in front of the camera, I didn't know what I was doing.
What was that movie like shooting? I mean, so many stars and so much insanity. Was the culture and the collaboration as tight as it would seem to be to the audience?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, for me, it was, well, think, Italian American kid wants to be an actor, growing up in New York. It's like going from,
It's the big league,
Double
man.
A going to the World Series with the Yankees or something. I mean, it's literally like that for me. I mean, there's no bigger people or more people I looked up to more than those, De Niro and Scorsese. Those were the guys. So all of a sudden you're on set with them, and the only reason
You felt comfortable at that point?
I felt comfortable because of Marty Scorsese, because he made me feel comfortable, and he treated me like an actor. He treated me like I belonged there. He didn't know me. He met me at the audition. He liked what I did. I did a lot of improvisation because I knew he liked that, and he made me feel comfortable. He said, when I got there, he came right up to me, said, if you need me, any questions, come right in my trailer. He said, anything you need, and he just made me feel like I belonged there, which is not always the case, and he didn't have to. And I think if he didn't, I wouldn't have been so open, because all those scenes were improvised. They were different every take.
A lot of ad-libbing?
The only line that was scripted was when he says, go fuck yourself, Tommy. That's the only line that's scripted. Everything else was just, so bring Tom, what's his name? Henry a drink, and just see what happens. And then he would say, well, this, and you'd do it. And in the morning, we'd rehearse for a couple of hours. And what he did say that was interesting, he said, treat the actors on and off camera as the character, which actually made me feel very comfortable, because then I didn't have to be this nervous actor looking up to my heroes. I could just be this waiter who works in this club. So De Niro comes in. It's the first time I've ever seen him. He comes to set, and it's just like, and he sits down. He's dealing with his props, his lighter, and a deck of cards. So I just walk up to him and I go, Jimmy, this is rehearsal. This is not, the camera's not even on set. I say, Jimmy, what do you want to drink? And he just looks at, you know how he's like, he's not sure who I am or what I'm doing. And he went, let me shot of scotch and a glass of water. I went and brought, and then he kind of realized I was the actor doing it, which he liked too, because he doesn't want, the last thing he wants is some young actor asking for advice or stupid, he wants to focus on his work. So that kind of took the
Harry
pressure.
does focus quite a bit. I mean, he's as focused as focus could be.
Yeah, well,
Right?
that's he's smart. I mean, what I learned from watching him was conserving energy, because shooting movies, the day's so long, there's tons of downtime, and then all of a sudden you're on, and you want to have your energy there. So if you dissipate it all at 8 o'clock in the morning, by 8 o'clock at night, you're not going to have nothing in the tank. And with him, to me, it looked like it was all about conservation and stuff.
We're talking with Mike Imperioli. If you have any questions, jump in. We're going to try to take some of your questions. And also, new book, The Perfume Burned His Eyes. Good book, great story, New York story. I don't think you'll be disappointed. And Ben, any questions?
Yeah, a lot of people asking about your next big project. What do you do next?
Okay.
We'll come back to, because I want to talk to Little Sopranos. We got to talk about a couple of the other movies. But what is the couple next big projects? You got a couple of things hopping.
We have Escape at Dannemora, which is a Showtime miniseries about the prison break in 2015.
Insanity.
The Shaw Skank, that's what the press dubbed this woman who was seduced by these two prisoners. So that stars Benicio del Toro and Patricia Arquette and Paul Dano. Directed by, I play Governor Andrew Cuomo. Ben Stiller directed it, and I got to spend some time with our governor.
New York guy.
Great guy, yeah. I never had met him before.
It's amazing how much work he's done.
Yeah.
He's unbelievable.
Yeah.
The family's unbelievable when you think of Dad, too. So what was that movie? I mean, is kind of what it is? Or because that woman had to be crazy, or?
She was crazy and taken advantage of and manipulated. You know, prisoners are very good at manipulating people.
They're great salesmen. They're great liars.
That's what they do, and they try to get stuff from people, and they did from her. But I think it's kind of a, it really gets into the nitty gritty of that story, which was
they wouldn't let that story out, right? Remember when they caught one of them got killed.
One of them was killed.
But the other one, they would not let him talk to the media.
Right. That it was scary, and it was interesting talking to Governor about it, because it was the day of the Belmont Stakes, which is a big day for the New York governor because they're always at the Belmont Stakes. He hears about this prison break, gets on a helicopter, flies upstate, and I said, "What about this? Why is it so important?" He said, "Number one," and he learned this from his father. He said, "A prison uprising is the worst nightmare you can think of," and we all go back to Attica, and what happened there. It's just a disaster. So anything that can lead to that, you have to put your hands on. And under Pataki, there was an escaped convict named Bucky Phillips, who was on the run for like 3 months. And I don't think they allocated enough resources to finding the guy. And he became almost like this folk hero in upstate New York. People were looking for him, and maybe people were trying to help. It was very strange. But he wound up killing a sheriff's deputy.
That's the problem, is that when these guys get loose, and if enough time goes by, more bad things happen.
They have no qualms about killing people.
Yeah.
So now you have two guys, and he went up there to, take the bull by the horns and, make people feel a little confident that he was going to put resources and money behind it and find these guys, which they did. But the way they seduced this woman and got her to give them tools, and it was a prison that had never been. It's like 100-and-something-year-old prison. No one ever escaped from it before.
Insane.
Yeah.
You got to spend time with Cuomo?
I did. He was really generous with his time. I wasn't sure how he was going to feel about somebody playing him or anything. And then Ben Stiller, the director, said, how would you like to sit down with him? I said, I would love to if he's willing. They're like, yeah, no, they want to set it up. And we actually hit it off really well and have remained friends.
I got to spend some time with his dad. We flying to Hank Aaron's birthday party in Atlanta. And I'm saying, wow, I'm sitting next to Mario Cuomo. I don't know what to do. I had Bob Costas to my right and Cuomo to my left, and I definitely got to get an hour in with Costas. That's a no-brainer. And if I could remember half of it, I'd be a genius with my boys in any kind of sports conversation, right?
Oh, of course.
But Cuomo, I said, would you mind if I ask you a couple questions? And what I loved was his answer. He says, you can ask me anything, and I will answer whatever you want. And we were able to get into all kinds of stuff. And I realized, but you don't always get to really know the governor. You don't really get to see the governor. I think Andrew's been amazing because he's been extremely vocal. He's been extremely available.
He's very available. And that's part of what he said. He's like, we live in very stressful times, like especially since 9/11. There's in New York City, especially everything's so heightened all the time. And that's why last year when the guy drove the car down the West Side Highway on Halloween.
Yeah.
He was there in like 10 minutes, and he's like,
yeah, that's crazy.
I feel a responsibility to be there so people know that
we have it under
somebody's leading. And I get that. And because, and he's responding to that, and that's a very real issue.
When's that come out on Showtime? When's that?
I'm not positive. I think it's coming out probably in the next 6 months, maybe by the end of my holidays or something.
It's been a while since we've had a good prison movie.
Yeah, no, this is a good one.
That'd be good.
Yeah,
it's a really interesting story because it's true, and we've seen it happen recently, and it's so insane that somebody would collaborate and help prisoners out, and thinking that these guys were actually in love, or one of them was in love with her. It's insane.
Yeah, and they were having sex with her in like the closet or whatever, and they were working in the, I guess the shop where they were doing needlework or whatever, or something like that.
And then, so that was just kind of progressive thing at some time.
Yeah,
just kind of
they worked her for a while.
What else are you working on? Anything else coming out?
I just did a movie with Nicolas Cage called Primal, where I play a NSA undercover guy. He plays a big game hunter. It's a real like action thriller.
That's a motion picture.
That's a movie.
How is Nicholas, by the way? Everything we hoped he would be?
He's great.
We
had a really good time.
Incredible. The width of his...
He's
there's no boundaries
very
with him?
professional.
Yeah.
I mean, extremely prepared, extremely professional, very smart, really entertaining. Got to spend some time with him. I really, really liked...
I haven't been able to get over Face Off.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I just haven't been able to... I mean, the acting, the width of his game is...
Yeah, he's pretty amazing.
He's pretty amazing, yeah.
I like him a lot.
So that's coming out.
That's coming out, and I did a few episodes of a new series that's coming out called Project Blue Book, which is based on the true stories of... Project Blue Book was created by the government, I think it was the Army or the Air Force, to investigate all these UFO sightings that happened after World War II, the beginning of the nuclear age, after Roswell. And this is real. Like, the government created this to investigate what the hell was going on, because there was some stuff going on. Roswell was a big benchmark in, the beginning of these investigations, and this is, I play a spy in that, Russian American who's working for the Russians.
It's fun. You always kind of hear different stories, but is finding work hard, or does work come to you?
It seems to go in spurts. It's both. One of the reasons I started writing was because instead of waiting around for acting work,
be productive.
Well, I started producing theater when I was right when I started acting, like in my early 20s. Started producing theater with some people from my acting class, and then I started directing theater, and then I started writing, and the first thing that I wrote a lot of stuff that never went anywhere, that was garbage. The first thing I wrote that got produced was Summer Sam, Spike Lee's movie.
Wow, that was back in my neighborhood in Brooklyn.
I wrote it with my friend Victor Colicchio.
It was a very emotional time in Brooklyn.
A big Yankee movie, too, because it was 77, and the Yankees have a big presence in the movie. And then I wrote for The Sopranos. I wrote 5 of those.
You produced and wrote, or The Sopranos?
I was executive producer on Summer Sam, and what we did on The Sopranos was the writer would usually be the on-set producer. So you would be on-set working closely with the director just to make sure that everything that needed to happen in the script was happening.
How did Sopranos come to you?
Sopranos came just the casting people, which was Sheila Jaffe and Georgianne Walken. At the time, they became friends, and anything I'd be remotely right for, they'd have me up. They cast me in several indie movies, and I auditioned for David. I thought I was boring him to tears because David has a real poker face. David Chase.
So you really had no idea?
I had no idea. I didn't even know what, to be honest, at the time, there were not really series on cable. It wasn't a thing, It was Our-List maybe was on, but I don't even know if I knew about that. But it wasn't.
Right.
So you're like a series on HBO? I don't know if and
so you weren't feeling this?
I liked it. I mean, you just from the pilot episode doesn't give you the breadth of the scope of where it's going to go. I mean, I thought it was good. I wasn't sure, is it a spoof? Is it a comedy? Or where is it? But what I did like was the talent they were attaching, which was Lorraine and Edie, and I didn't know Jim. I knew Dominic. I knew Vinny Pastore. I didn't know him at the time. I knew Vinny Pastore, Tony Sirico, and then they flew me out to L.A. to test for the. So the test was, I was testing for my part. I was the only actor testing that they flew out for my part. Edie was testing for her part. Lorraine was testing for her part. No other actors. And then, but there were 3 actors testing for Tony Soprano. Michael Rispoli, who's on Deuce now, but he was on Sopranos. He played Jackie Aprile, who dies early on.
Right,
Michael Rispoli, James Gandolfini, and Steven Van Zandt in Silvio wig and everything. And he's sitting there, and I'm looking at that, like, I know that face, but who's that guy? And Sheila, the casting woman, said, "That's little Steven Van Zandt." I'm like, oh.
You know what's crazy about little Stevie Van Zandt? Opened up the Hard Rock in 1984, and he was there every night.
You worked there?
Yeah, I was assistant general manager, and that was 84.
Do you know Mike Grozier? Do you know
yes,
Michael Grozier?
yes,
He's a good friend of mine.
yes.
Yeah, he's with Live Nation.
Yeah,
now. Yeah, he's a buddy of mine.
That's a lot of people from that initial team
went on to
rock and roll, literally rock and roll in a lot of different ways. I mean, it was a very over. Eric Chrisman and Steve Chrisman really overhired. I was that was like a lottery ticket for me in those days. I was 23. I had no idea what the Hard Rock was going to be. Isaac Tigret.
Right? Yeah. Isaac Tigret.
And, Dan Aykroyd was there all the time. I mean, what was amazing is how many celebrities, what's his name, from Groundhog's Day. Bill Murray was there. Because his brother was a bartender.
All right.
Hanging out with Bill. I mean, I wasn't a big actor. I was more of a sports guy, but I mean, the amount. But that was a place where a lot of celebrities, actors hung out and were comfortable.
But that was like the first place that wasn't like a nightclub, like Studio or Limelight, or something that had like a rope outside.
Yeah, and
they had to wait online.
And they were very careful. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure on me, particularly because they really didn't want to differentiate, celebrity and rope hopping.
All right.
So, guys, one guy one night pulls a wad of hundreds out. He says, "I'm coming in." I go, "It's a line. You got to wait. I'm sorry." And he starts burning the hundreds, which was a real mind fucker.
Really burning them?
Oh, really burning them. Yeah, he burned 5 of them before I said, "Okay, well, let's stop here." Okay. I was 23, and that was like way more than I can handle. So I'm gonna,
That'll get your attention.
This got my attention. I can't take any of your money. Because, the minute if I ever took $1, I had 8 guys just doing security in the front right there. That's how crazy it was. 200 people in line. So that was amazing. And, to me, back to The Sopranos for a minute, what was amazing about that show is how it was the talk on Monday, everyone. What had happened, what's going to happen. And the real talk was when we ended up doing a deal with you guys.
All right.
And but we couldn't get Gando to do it. He didn't want to do it. So Gando calls me up because I've been relentlessly trying to get him to do this, and he says, "Why should I do this with you?" I said, "Well, we got all these other guys. We're going to sign. This is going to be great." And he explained that to me, and we're going to sign these posters. And he goes, "Well, meet me for dinner tonight." I said, "I'm meeting James Gandolfini for dinner." But what was really fucked up, he didn't come out of character for the first 40 minutes. He fucked with me. He was acting like Tony Soprano. I'm in the Tribeca Grill, and I'm like, I cannot believe I'm not going to get this deal done. He's like, why should I do this for you? Where's this stuff going to go? And how do I know it's not going to be forgery? I mean, a million questions. And I was like, oh man, this may not happen. And then after a while, he's like, listen, I just want to be careful. But what I loved about him? He was like, listen, I really don't want to do this, but I would never get in the way of my friends in the cast making the money.
Yes, he was all about that.
So it's all, if you're going to treat them right, and I want to make sure they're paid well, I don't need to get the lion's share of the money, then I'll do it. And very rarely ever ran into a celebrity with that.
Very rare.
Right?
Yes, he was all about that.
It's a gem.
He got a deal, like a back end or some kind of royalty deal that I think only he got, and then he gave each of us, 13 or 15 of us, principal cast, $33,000 gift, cash.
Who does that?
$500,000. That's $500,000 times 13, pretty much. That's big. Nobody does that.
Nobody does that.
They'll buy you
What
jacket, a crew coat or T-shirt.
What stands out in that series to you? As far as an episode or some personalities.
I mean, that show was like walking out of your house and going to hang out with your friends down the corner every day. I mean, because, see, the acting community in New York is much smaller than L.A. The Italian-American community is even smaller. So I had worked with Sirico, I had worked with Edie, I had worked with Vinny Pastore, I had worked with Dominic, Johnny Ventimiglia, who played the chef. We go back to acting school. I'd done a million things with him. And then the people that we didn't know, we all just, we all relatively came from similar backgrounds, similar places, and we were very proud of the show. We all kind of hit together, so there was something like bonding about it.
A lot of work. That show, was it hard to shoot?
Oh yeah, it was a lot of work, but it was just fantastic.
Not when you were in a strip joint shooting those episodes, though.
Well,
those are the better
strip
days,
joint
or?
at 6 a.m. is
that's
not
tough.
the
Yeah,
prettiest
yeah,
place in the
yeah,
world.
Yeah,
but
it does take a little while to warm up there.
But I mean, there's so many. We had a lot of fun. I mean, there was one night. We were throwing Joey Pants's torso, or because his character Ralphie gets killed, and then we cut his head off, and we buried the head, and then we were going to throw the body off a cliff. So we were out in some state park in New Jersey on a Friday night, and it gets dark. We rehearse, and it's me and Jim, and we got he's in a bag or a sack, and we get to the edge of the cliff, and we throw the body off. And they're like, this is going to be a big light. It's going to take a really long time. So you get really bored. Now it's Friday night. Now it's like 9 o'clock, and it's going to be maybe 3-4 hours of lighting. So we go in the trailer, me and Jim and the writer, Mitch Burgess. And Jim takes out a bottle of Wild Turkey. We start drinking. By the time they come to get us, the bottle of Wild Turkey is gone, and so are we. So we get to the edge of the cliff, and Jim and I are, and they're worried, there goes the franchise if we fall off the cliff. So they had to chain our legs to trees so we could get close enough to throw the body off without falling off the cliff.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
A true story, yeah.
Wow, what an episode. What a show. It's just phenomenal.
And the other thing that really stands out was the episode with the Pine Barrens, which was when Sirico, Paulie Walnuts, and Christopher get lost in the woods, which was just...
Was it cold, or was it snowy, or was it...
It was snowy and cold. It was not written to take place in the snow, but right the day before we go to shoot, there's a blizzard. And at first we're thinking, oh, this is fun. We're screwed. We have to wait till... And then we're like, no, this is like a blessing. Like, we couldn't have written this in because it just made the landscape so much more alien. And they became so much more fish out of water. They're not dressed for it. They're wearing little leather jackets, and he loses his shoe. And it was just very... it was almost like a little movie unto itself. That was a lot of fun.
Did you produce that one, or...?
No, that was written by Steve Buscemi. No, directed by Steve Buscemi, written by Terry Winters. That was a really good one.
Wow. So we could talk about Sopranos probably for hours. What's looking back, to the future, going back to that, something you have on your mind that you want to do? Do you want to at some point write something for a motion picture, or write a screenplay?
I wrote and directed an indie movie called The Hungry Ghost that Steve Sciarippa starred in. Actually, that came out in 2009. That had a little release in New York and LA and festivals here in Europe.
Do we not see a lot of movies that actually get made? Is it possible?
Yeah,
because
like most of the stuff I've done, no one's seen. To be honest, no, really. I basically made my living in the 80s and 90s doing independent movie, because independent film really kind of took off in the late 80s and early 90s, and at the time, that's how I transitioned from working in the restaurant business to becoming a working actor. I just did indie movie after indie movie, and a lot of that stuff people don't see. I mean, there's a really great one that David Chase saw, that he cast a lot of the actors. It was called Trees Lounge. It was written, directed, and starred Steve Buscemi.
How do you see something like that?
Well, now you can probably see it on, streaming, probably Hulu and Netflix, maybe, or Amazon. I mean, at the time, you had to go to the movie theaters, and they had DVDs, but...
Yeah.
But I'm always doing stuff like this. The next thing I really want to do is do an adaptation of this and direct it for the screen, write it and direct it.
Did you write with that in mind?
No,
or?
I didn't write it at all with that in mind. I really only gave myself to this as a book, as a piece of fiction. And then when people started reading it, they're like, "Is this going to be a movie? This should be a movie. I can see it as a movie." And then I said, I did a film that hasn't been released yet. Called Cabaret Maxime, and we shot it in Lisbon 2 years ago, and it just opened in Portugal, and now it's going to start playing in festivals in Europe, and hopefully we're trying to get a distribution deal for America. But I went to see it finally this spring. A bunch of soprano actors are in that. Johnny Ventimiglia and Arthur Nascarella, David Proval, who played Richie Aprile.
That's cool.
So I saw that movie and I was like, okay, now I can see how this can work as a movie. You know, sometimes you see something and it
So you got to take
inspires you.
the process. You got to take something like this, turn it into a screenplay first,
Absolutely.
and then.
Well, first, I have a
sell
couple
it.
of producers reading it now.
Okay.
And if they get interested, then I'll adapt it, as a screenplay. And, you know, the movie's going to be, you know, you have to, because a book is a book. I mean,
Yeah,
you
you
know,
gotta
it needs to
figure
be
out how to
opened up.
dramatize it
What's the way in and how you're going to expand it. But I think there's enough in there to make it cinematic.
We need some more good movies. But it seems like the outlet for good movies, and there's so much good TV too out
Yes.
there. At least that's wide open. So you know, if you got something good, there's a place to go.
I think so.
What are you watching these days? Are you watching some TV? You
I don't
liking that stuff? What's coming up on TV?
I don't watch a ton of TV, to be honest. I don't
Okay.
really watch a ton. I don't even know what I've been watching lately. I did like The Crown. I thought that was really good. Did you see that?
I saw a little bit of. My wife's really big on it.
I like the historical. I like historical stuff.
How about you watch things like Shameless or Homeland and those kinds of things?
Never
or,
saw them.
Ray Donovan would be.
Never saw. I don't watch a lot of
But
television.
Ray Donovan would be kind of, you know, modern day version, people say, of like of Sopranos.
Well, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, that certainly
Does a
got
nice
good
job with it.
actors.
It's all on him. You know, it's.
He's a very good actor. And Voight, I did a movie with Voight, and I spent a lot of time with him, and I love him. He's fantastic.
You don't realize, but this is his first really big gig because he's one of those guys that plays the second, third lead, always an important role, but he's in a lot of
now,
movies.
I mean, back then he
back
was
then.
huge. You know,
He's just, you know, he has a wide range too.
he's incredible.
You know, he's a wide range, very talented. Now here they're bringing Ray Donovan to New York. Be excited about that.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I like that. This is where all the sanity is anyway. Or it doesn't seem like
Absolutely.
there anywhere in this country is lacking in sanity. All right, closing remarks. Where do you work? What are you doing for fun? Anything you working on the charity end, or again, are you like doing any signings with this book? Do you do signings with this book?
I am doing the Brooklyn Book Fair in September, which is a big one now, and it's really cool.
The Brooklyn Book Fair. Where is that?
Yeah.
You know?
At several venues in downtown, mostly downtown Brooklyn. Like
Everything's in downtown Brooklyn.
Yeah,
Man, it's amazing.
It's been the last few years. I've done a bunch of literary festivals. The book just came out in Italian, so I was in Rome and Salerno in June for the release, and I did some festivals there, and then it comes out in French in September, so I'm going to Paris for that.
Wow, so the book's doing well.
Yeah, I'm doing a San Francisco book festival.
I can't get my book in English done. Now that's what I'm hoping. Just at my third book.
I'm
coming
shocked
out.
that I mean
Yeah.
to have it come out in Italian was for me a
That's
big
cool.
thing because I got to read at a festival in the ancient Forum in Rome, where my family is from Rome. So my cousin was there and reading, and I mean it was this 2,000-year-old
Are you popular?
temple.
Are you popular all over the world now, or
In a lot of places, yeah.
right.
Sopranos was. We're actually a couple of us, Steve Sharippa and I and Vinny, are doing we're going to be doing a tour of Australia. Just doing like a fan, tour, because the show is. It's kind of having a new, like another generation is discovering it. You know what I mean? It's like people my age, in their 50s and 60s watched it when it came out, and it was really a big thing. But now it's having another, kids that were too young to watch it when it came out, who were into like good TV, are now discovering it. So it's kind of having another wave of popularity.
That's cool.
which
Good
is
for
cool.
you.
Yeah.
Wow,
it's nice.
that's good. Well, good for you guys. You guys are, one thing, the whole cast, it's going to hard to meet a good bunch of guys like that.
Very
Regardless
good guys,
of the popularity.
Yeah,
I don't
you've
think
met
you guys
all of
changed.
us, so
I don't
you know
think
them.
I don't think you guys have changed one bit. For the most part,
You know,
pretty good.
that was the thing about that show. If you came on to that show, you had to. There was no diva, there was no star thing. Even with Jim, I mean, and you learned that really quick when you were on that show. Don't play any game. You know, you had to be one of the all for one, one for all. That was, fight the good fight.
Yeah.
That was the deal there.
That's
so.
good. If you got a second, get to the bookstore. Brooklyn in September, the Brooklyn Book Show. The perfume burned his eyes. Great story, father-son story. It seems like, and then kind of a mentor story.
Yes, definitely.
Kind of a cool story. So pick that book up. Good father gift, or good gift for your son if he likes to read. Been great having you, Mike. Thanks for
it's been
coming.
great.
Yankee fan. We saw you at the Yankee game
Last night, yeah. The
Yeah.
Yankees won. It was my dad's birthday.
You're right behind the plate.
We put his name up
How
on
old
the
your dad?
screen. 77.
You look good.
He's good.
He
He
was
was
having
thrilled.
fun. Is
Yeah.
there anything better than going with your son to a game?
Nothing better. Yeah, especially if they win.
It's nice to experience.
My
You
first
can't
game
spend enough
was
time.
Mickey Mantle Day, 1969.
Really?
He took me. I was 3. So he
Did you have a
retired.
banner? Did you have a banner? Besides
I still have it. I still have it at home. Because he retired the year before, and then the day they retired, his number was 69, and he scalped some tickets and brought me. I was 3 years old. Still remember it, actually.
And probably those tickets were like $2.
Probably. He said he grew up right near the stadium. Like, he grew up in the Bronx in the 40s and 50s. And he said bleacher seats when he was a teenager, 75 cents.
The obstructed ones down the line, $1.50. The best Mac Daddy seats, $4. I was 1970. I go to my mom. I said, Mom, a couple of the older boys, they want to go to the game. I'm the fourth. Am I good? She gives me $5. I take the train. We go to the game. Glenn Brown goes up to the, remember those big ticket windows they had? Those big. He's like, you're not going to believe this. 4 rows off the field, $4. $4. I give it, great. So we're 4 rows off. I got my first autograph. Met Joe Pesci. Joe came over, signed some autographs. I said, Joe, really didn't want your autograph. Really wanted Tom Trash over there. You can get him to come over. He goes, Trash, get over here now and sign for these kids. So I come home. I remember it was 15 cents for a hot dog, 15 cents for the Subway. It was that cheap. And when I come home, my mother's like, where's the change? I said,
From $5.
It was $4 and the Subway and a hot dog and a program. We kept score. She went, I could still hear her yelling. She went and found those older boys, tracked them down, and made them each give her $1 back. She says, $4, I can't imagine what moron would spend $4 on a ticket. And she got 3 of those dollars back.
Where did you live? Where'd you live?
Brooklyn. Flatbush, Kings Highway, yeah. She's like, there's no way somebody could spend $4 on a ticket. She couldn't get her arms wrapped around it. So every time I sit in those expensive seats, the Legends or whatever, I'm like, Mom, I hear you. I know you're not happy with me right now. Because you would not be
You
good.
would not be happy
not be
knowing
good.
now.
Yeah, the $4 seats, yeah. And boy, that was maybe one of my favorite days. It was the first time I could see the game. Because I was close enough to see the pitches. A lot of times you're all the way up in the.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard sometimes.
You're just feeling the vibe up there. You're
Yeah,
not seeing the details.
Yeah, there's nothing like. I like the Yankees this year. Hope they can pull it together. So you're a big Yankee fan, being grown up in the
Always,
Bronx.
yeah.
A little basketball too, or football, or.
Knicks and Jets.
Oh boy, so it's a little tough times for us. It's gonna come around. All right, well, thank you, Mike. Great seeing you. Pick up the book. Come see him at the book fair.